Hi, welcome back to another video here, and basically because it's like close to the end of the year and I'm like chilling and just waiting for Christmas and New Year's, I wanted to do kind of like a chill and funny video. Basically, I'm going to be reading my old English essays from high school. I only have them from year 10 up to year 12. I'm going to be reading extracts from it and reacting and commenting on the stuff I've written before. So this video is completely unscripted. It's going to be my most spontaneous and authentic reactions to reading stuff that I've written like ages ago. And basically, I haven't revisited my essay in a really long time. I probably haven't really revisited them since entering university. So yeah, let's see how it goes, and I hope it'll be interesting, and I hope that when I go in chronological order from year 10 to year 12, there hopefully, fingers crossed, should be a trend of improvement. So to start with a bit of a clarification how these essays work. So in my high school, usually it's like a 3-paragraph structure. So you have like introduction, and then you do 3 different themes in 3 paragraphs. Some of the comparative essays may work a bit differently, but a typical one where you analyze like one piece of work, that will be how it works. And when I go over them, I will obviously read the introduction of each one and then probably like pick 1 or 2 maximum paragraphs to read, and I will share some of my thoughts, and I actually look forward to some of you guys' thoughts in the comments. Like, anyways, I'm going to start from year 10, and they weren't that great, but I hope they weren't that awful. So this one is on William Shakespeare's play Othello, and it reads, William Shakespeare's tragedy Othello utilizes a combination of dramatic elements to explore significant aspects of human experience, reflecting and interrogating traditional Renaissance values. Okay, it's like a really broad thesis. It basically says nothing, and because we have to like kind of memorize our draft and then adapt it to write in the actual exam, you usually have like a really broad thesis that you would change in the exam. So yes, most of my thesis like essentially say nothing, and I don't know what was the thing with me back then. I really like to use utilize instead of just use, and a lot of my English teachers, they were like, we're gonna go crazy if we see students use like utilize again. Anyways, the play follows the downfall of its protagonist Othello under the manipulation of its antagonist Iago, providing insight into Renaissance conceptions about gender, race, and the evils of human nature. So yes, this part is my 3 themes. The female characters serve to expose and challenge the oppression of women in 17th century European society, while the racial biases towards dark-skinned Africans in Elizabethan England are mirrored onto Othello. Shakespeare also traces the nature of deviltry. Sorry, this is a bit funny. The nature of deviltry in human experience, creating a portrait of Iago that highlights his wickedness and Machiavellian traits. Because the part about deviltry is just, I don't know why I use that word. It's just a bit funny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the 3rd paragraph on deviltry. Sorry. Okay, it says, Othello explores the extent of evil in human nature by incorporating this concept into the play's villain Iago, whose cunning manipulations also correspond to a certain extent with the Machiavellian figure created by Niccolo Machiavelli in his book The Prince. I don't know why to a certain extent was needed. Like, obviously it's to a certain extent. Shakespeare intentionally designs Iago to represent the evil that stems out of a combination of vile human emotions. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my word usage. Iago expresses discontent at Cassio's promotion to lieutenant, as well as suspicion that Othello has slept with his wife, to which he adds, I know not if it be true, yet I will do as if for surety. A mixture of resentment, jealousy, and doubtfulness. Okay. Can be observed through these thoughts, all of which contributes crucially. I don't know, my phrasing's just really funny. Like, what is contributes crucially to the motivation of his wrongdoings? After Iago successfully corrupts and destroys Othello, the latter says, I look down towards his feet, but that's a fable, and as an allusion to the cloven feet of the devil, creating an imagery that emphasizes the extent of his malignity. Okay, so that's where the deviltry came from. He displays great talent in the art of deceit, as apparent from frequent statements of honest Iago echoed by various characters, signifying their complete ignorance of his diabolical plans. Indeed, Cassio says to himself after a conversation with Iago, I never knew a Florentine more kind and honest. The statement generates the effect of dramatic irony to further point out Iago's success in duplicitous manipulation, reflecting the core value of Machiavellianism, which is the employment of cunning duplicity in general conduct. I don't think Machiavellianism, like the core value of Machiavellianism, is cunning duplicity in general conduct, because like it's more about the prince who's supposed to be like able to do anything and employ these to secure like his political means, but like the core thing that he's trying to do is not be duplicitous but like be a good political leader. So I don't know what was going on there. As the play's villain, Iago demonstrates the great potential of evil in human nature whilst engaging with traits of the Machiavellian figure. Okay, it was yeah, it wasn't awful, but it was just, there are points that are kind of a bit funny. And yes, because all of our essays are capped at around 1,000 words and you have to do 3 themes, so obviously I can't really expand on it in detail, so a lot of the parts will seem really jumpy, kind of. Like they jump around, it's not a lot of like expanded analysis, but that was just due to the word count. So the next essay will be on Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and this is also from year 10. Just to say, I actually quite enjoyed studying the book. I read the book before I studied it in school, and I liked it like moderately, but after studying it, I found it like really interesting, especially like a lot of the themes and like Austen's witty commentary. I think Sense and Sensibility is my favorite Austen book. I'm not that big of a fan of Pride and Prejudice. I think Northanger Abbey is okay. I haven't really read what people think is the best Emma, so maybe I'll try it in the far future. I have too many reading lists. Anyways, so it says, through the drama that unfolds in Sense and Sensibility, Jane Austen interrogates a variety of Regency values that govern social structure and interaction. The novel reflects the wealth-based hierarchical nature of British society, one that denies female autonomy in marriage and forces many to adopt hypocritical conduct. To maintain relative social and personal gratification in such systems, she recommends a prudent constraint over personal emotions and needs in correspondence to social propriety. You know what this like last sentence reminds me of? She recommends a prudent constraint on, you know, it's like those conduct books in Victorian Regency times be like, ladies should be this, we recommend like prudence in this and that. Yeah, anyways. So let's start from the first paragraph. Austen promotes marriages based upon voluntary affection and reproaches the materialistic matches that women were forced into due to their lack of economic independence. I don't think there should be a comma there. The novel reflects and condemns women's traditional dependency upon marriage as a way of achieving financial security because of the laws and social forces in a patriarchal society that deprives. I think you should say that deprives their ability to obtain a living. This sentence it's just so long and it has no comma, and I don't know why I said reflects and condemns, because it could have just like been substituted by interrogates, discusses, examines. A satiric approach to Miss Morton's passivity in marriage, exhibited by Eleanor's patronizing tone in The Lady, I suppose, has no choice in the affair, indicates Austen's disdain for money-oriented matches where the woman's opinion is ignored or forcibly hidden. I don't know how that quote really proves the point, but okay. On the other hand, Mrs. Dashwood embodies Austen's own ideals that endorses the freedom of choosing one's partner by stating it was enough for Mrs. Dashwood that Edward appeared to be amiable, that he loved her daughter, and that Eleanor returned a partiality. Austen uses parallelism to create a balanced flow of language that emphatically establishes the significance of love in marriage. However, further into the novel, Mrs. Dashwood exclaims, his fortune too. Everybody cares about that. As an important attribute of Colonel Brandon's suitability as Marianne's husband, with the exclamation mark and italicizing of that, Austen redraws the reader's attention to the inevitability of seeking financial stability through marriage due to women's I don't know why I said incapability, like incapacity, okay, incapacity works. Incapability of supporting themselves. The novel strives to introduce mutual affection as the basis of a good marriage, but it also admits the equally essential consideration of wealth in the search for a potential partner. Okay. I'm just thinking about this paragraph, and I feel like it was really stupid to use Mrs. Dashwood as both examples, because it just feels like she's contradicting herself and she's inconsistent. Because like, I already said Mrs. Dashwood embodies Austen's own ideals that endorses the freedom of choosing one's partner, and then she like exclaims that everyone cares about fortune, which was, I don't understand. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I don't understand. In summary, there were a bit of like strange stuff in my year 10 essays. I still can't get over the part where I said the nature of deviltry. And now let's move on to year 11. And I hope in some of my year 11 essays, I would read it and be like, whoa, that was great. Because sometimes I do have experience with reading my old essays and be like, whoa, that part is so good. So I hope this happens with my year 11 essays. If not, we can go on and try year 12. The next one I'm going to read is a comparative essay, and the idea is to kind of compare unreliable narration, how individuals use narration to shape their realities, and it's usually unreliable, and it's basically drawing a parallel between Robert Browning's 2 poems, Porphyria's Lover and My Last Duchess, and the very famous film Atonement. I'll read like the second half because it seems more interesting. The speaker in Browning's My Last Duchess uses narrative to create an alternative representation of truth in justifying his crime to an internal and external audience, and similarly, the elderly Browning constructs a fictitious, optimistic reality for Cecilia and Robbie as an act of atonement. That was really long. That was just a really long sentence. Browning speakers... What? You know, like, whenever I read stuff that has, like, 2 possessive apostrophes, it just feels weird. But sometimes when I'm writing, like, I feel like I can't avoid that. So I just put it in, and then whenever I read it, it just nags me. Browning speaker's obsession with power and control, the real motive behind the murder of his wife, is revealed through the aside. Since none puts by the curtains I have drawn for you, but I, the emphasis on the personal pronoun, disclosing his joy at holding complete possession over his Duchess portrait, which could... I don't know if this part was grammatically correct about the possessive, about Duchess, but okay. Which could not achieve over her living being. I think there could have been a he, which he could not have achieved over her living being. He distorts the reality and his intentions by pleading sexual immodesty as the crime that leads to her death in "'Twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek," using the imagery of a spot to compare the Duchess's expression of joy and implied flirtatious nature to a disease-like phenomenon. I really like this analysis, that's good. However, Browning creates dramatic irony in undermining the reliability of the speaker's assertions, allowing the reader to understand the Duchess as a woman of light-hearted nature, who enjoyed the aesthetic pleasure of the dropping daylight in the west, the bough of cherries, the wild moor equally. Hence, using the gap between the speaker's fabrication and the reality of his crime, Browning exposes and satirizes the Duke's construction of a worldview based on unquestioned patriarchal dominance. I didn't really understand the last part. It shifted really suddenly to discussing the Duchess's disposition. My argument seems to say that the fact that she loved nature is incompatible with the fact that she's adulterous, which I don't understand. I don't understand what was the argument here. So the next essay I'm going to do is on The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I've mentioned this book in my previous video on books that are overrated, and we'll link that here. And I think, and in that video I've mentioned that I think it's overrated because it just stuffs a lot of themes and symbolisms and techniques and everything in it that really erases its required sense of fictionality as a book. And yes, I still hold that judgment now, but what my essay is going to analyze is exactly all those techniques and themes that's got stuffed in it. And to the extent that the novel manages to do that, I think it's done a great job. The protagonist often uses storytelling as a way of affirming her individuality and freedom, resisting the regime's attempts to obliterate female self-identities and capacities of expression. She puns Descartes' rhetorical statement, "I think, therefore I am," which posits the act of thinking as proof of one's existence in "I tell, therefore you are," cementing the existence of an audience to her narrative. Oh my god. Like, I wrote this before I had any idea that I was going to do philosophy, and I was just, at the time I thought this pun was so cool. But now reading this sentence as a philosophy student, I feel like I could write an entire essay on whether "I tell, therefore you are" works in a philosophical sense. It's like once you study the degree, everything torments you from it. Everything, like, whenever you read stuff, you can't just like read it anymore. You're just like, okay, I'm going to analyze it. This belief psychologically empowers her with a sense of self-assertion against the regime's prohibition of female literacy that suppresses their voices. Offred's narration reflects Baudrillard's theory that people seek happiness and fulfillment through the simulacra of reality, composed of symbols and signs that formulate human experience, as her story creates a binary reality that allows her to simultaneously experience the past and present, gaining psychological freedom under physical constraint. The use of present tense in describing moments of flashback fluidly connects them to the present, as if the two occur in parallel. In her statement regarding her daughter, the little girl who is now dead sits in the back seat. The present tense of sits creates a metaphysical juxtaposition to the state of dead, forming an impossibility that can only be realized through the dual reality of Offred's narratology, her means of escape. Similar linguistic manipulation is adopted in her narration of the present, which amuses Luke wasn't a doctor, isn't, correcting herself with present tense to consolidate the belief of a reality where he is alive. Thus, Atwood argues that Offred's narrative construction, especially in linking the past to the present, is a crucial provision of temporary escape and limited dissidence against totalitarian control. I really love my analysis of the tense and how different tenses in narrative shape realities, especially helping the main character to fight basically unfavorable realities. I just really have a thing for narratology techniques and how unreliable narration changes the subject's reality and stuff. And in my Charlotte Bronte video linked here, there was this part in the Villette section where I talked about how the protagonist Lucy Snow's narration, she also plays with tense, and how her changes in tense manipulates her reality, and that was quite interesting. So if you're interested, please check that video out. Now we have progressed to year 12, and the first essay from year 12 that I'm going to give is on Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I really like that book, both as like a fun read in my free time, but also in studying it. I'm not personally a huge fan of Dickens, honestly. Oh, it reminds me, maybe I should do a video on Dickens sometime, but I'm not a huge fan of him. He's alright, his plot is sometimes gripping, but I don't like his loquaciousness. I know that he was paid by words and, you know, weekly installments and stuff, so that helped him make money, but his tone and his loquaciousness, I know a lot of people find it funny, witty, but I kind of found it a bit annoying, just my personal opinion. Anyways, so the introduction to this essay reads, Charles Dickens' Great Expectations is a work of social critique that reflects and interrogates his contemporary ways of thinking. I don't understand why I was obsessed with using reflects and interrogates. Like, bro, just use examines or discusses. Like, I have to, like, for me, I felt like I had the need to use one word that says, oh, it like reflects, mirrors, portrays, and the other word that shows that the author is like in some sort of dissent towards the values that he's portraying. The Bildun's roman plot charts Pip's persistent efforts to forge his identity, illuminating. I also really like using illuminating. It's been a pattern here. Illuminating the breakdown of traditional hierarchies and growing social mobility, the novel alludes to contemporary paradigms that equate social elevation to personal virtue within the capitalistic system, a superstructure that Dickens views as conflicting with the innate good of humanity. Okay. I think my middle paragraph in this essay is good, so I'll read that. The role of social class as a signifier of self-worth is illegitimated through Pip's Bildun's roman journey that ends in his disillusionment of this external status. As a boy, he thinks, I was a common labouring boy in a low-lived bad way. These internal echoes of his zealous derogations enforcing an identification of shame with his working-class origins. When he leaves for London, the light mist was solemnly rising to show him the world, an allusion to the evening mist over the marsh glides in Milton's Paradise Lost when Adam and Eve leaves Eden, implying that London is a world of corruption within which Pip misplaces aspirations for self-improvement. Indeed, in this corrupt world, Compeyson, a heinous criminal with a gentlemanly appearance, is recommended to mercy on account of good character and bad company, whereas Magwitch, despite his lesser crime, receives a severer sentence because his lowly origins imply a poor disposition in the Victorian mind. This injustice exposes the hypocritical definition of gentility, where the empirical outcome of an elite education and wealth is equated to moral righteousness. Thus, when Pip finally disassociates his self-worth from social class, he reflects, my great expectations had all dissolved like our own marsh mist before the sun, the motif of dispelled mist signifying this disillusionment. I don't know if I needed to use disillusionment, like, I could have just used disillusion. Here, the character's self-awareness converges with the retrospective narrator who has intruded into the story frequently to attack his younger self's wretched hankerings after money and gentility. Dickens uses this definition of Pip's Bildun's roman to express the didactic of personal integrity as unrelated to wealth or status. I think I really liked how I discussed the motif of the mist, and then at the end of the paragraph I came back to it. It's like really matching and really good. But I think it's also mainly due to the fact that there's a word count restriction. It is really jumpy. It's like I'm jumping to conclusions. It's like I didn't really analyze how this change happens. It's just like, oh, suddenly Pip changed and suddenly the narrative converges, and there wasn't a lot of evidence, a lot of analysis, a lot of progress given to it. But I think the general gist of it was fine. The next essay is like a comparative essay on Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and Blake's poem London. And the idea behind this essay is to talk about like what sort of human experience that they depict and like what sorts of similarities they have. So I'm going to like read basically half of it, how the comparison is staged. The play represents the human experience of ethnic marginalization, illuminating the motivations behind the subjugation of some consequent feelings of resentment in the oppressed minority. Gratiano publicly attacks Shylock, that cursed spirit governed by a wolf infused itself in thee, degrading the latter's humanity by alluding to the Greek philosopher Pythagoras' idea that an animal soul could pass into a human body. With animalistic imagery, the Christian characters dehumanizes. I apologize for my appalling grammar, honestly. Jewish identity, excluding them from Renaissance principles of humanism that highly respects the individual, reinforcing centuries of ethnic ostracism that serves to consolidate Christian socio-economic dominance. This superiority is highlighted in the Venetian law, one drop of Christian blood, thy lands and goods are by the lords of Venice confiscate, where the specification of Christian blood illuminates legal elevation of Christian rights. Indeed, Shylock mocks Antonio by mimicking, Shylock, we would have monies, you say so, should I not say, had the dog money? Expressing anger regarding his humiliation and satirizing the paradox of simultaneously denying Jewish humanity whilst benefiting from their loans, underlining Christian moral hypocrisy. I don't know why all of my sentences are so long, Hence, Shakespeare depicts the motivations of self-interest which lead to an indulgence of ambivalent moral standards, enforcing the experience of ethnic discrimination. I don't know, like the concluding sentence is just a bit weird. It's like, maybe I was trying to say like the indulgence of ambivalent moral standards enforces ethnic discrimination, but it doesn't like enforce the experience of ethnic discrimination, because like the experience of ethnic discrimination is like on the receiving end, but I don't understand. I'm sorry. I think my year 12 essay just got worse. I don't know how I did in my exam. London mirrors Shakespeare in deploring the oppression of those disempowered by the majority value system, focusing instead on representing the experiences of misery in those of inferior economic status. I think there should be like a while in the beginning of the sentence. Otherwise, the instead here wouldn't work. Like, but if I added the while, it also seemed like it wouldn't work. I don't know what I was thinking. In the opening line, Blake writes of London's chartered streets, applying a double entendre on charter to indicate both the physical delineation of streets in city planning and the system of commercial management of London that underlies human experience. I kind of get what I was trying to say, but it just wasn't the best way to say it. The effect of such social constraints is shown using alliteration in marks of weakness, marks of woe, emphasizing the depth of suffering, and through the auditory imagery of cry in every man and every infant. The synesthesia, matching the oral sense to the visual imagery of manacles in the mind-forged manacles I here, links the previously established ideas of misery and suppression to society's metaphorical manacles as its cause. I don't understand how the synesthesia links the idea of misery and suppression to society's metaphorical manacles. Like, there is no connection. Hence, London paints an experience of suffering within a stratified mercantile society, evoking emotions of agony and disempowerment that mirrors the Jewish experience of marginalization depicted in Merchant. Yeah, it's another like really like just too quick of a conclusion, but that's just due to the word count. There's like nothing I could do about it. I don't know, like maybe you've noticed all of my essays employ like a lot of literary techniques. That was because our school and also like the examination system says that we have to have a lot of literary techniques. That is how you get marks. You can't just like give textual evidence without saying what technique is present there. And I think that was, yes, that's good for like educating high school English students on like the techniques people use in literature, but it's also very highly restricting because sometimes you can just get it from the message. You don't need the technique, and if you're limited to analyzing things that have techniques, there is like a big limit on the evidence that you can analyze. And there's sometimes like that weird case before. You try to say this technique does that, but it really doesn't, but you just have to put it there because there's technique. So yeah, it was a very interesting, but also a bit of a low-key embarrassing experience to read my old essays, because sometimes I read them and I was like, I don't know what I was talking about. And at the time, I was really proud of all of my essays. Well, I still am really proud of some of my essays. I actually really like the one on Handmaid's Tale. But yeah, now that I read back on some of them, I don't know what I was writing. And at the time, it felt like so exceedingly hard. It felt so exceedingly hard. And I was just proud that I was able to write them to begin with. And English was definitely my favorite subject in high school. So it was like a lot of pain, but also a lot of love. And I don't know, maybe by like towards the end of my second year in uni, I might go do like a reading back to my Michaelmas first year essays and seeing how bad they were, because I'm pretty sure they were pretty bad. And I think the further I go down my education, like when I read back past essays, it's going to be really bad. But it's also really all part of the journey, and I appreciate all of my essays, even though they were sometimes bad and also sometimes quite funny, like bad in a funny way. But anyways, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about it. What you guys think about my essays themselves, or the works I've analyzed, or like share like what sorts of stuff, like what sorts of work you've written analysis essays on in your high school time. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you're interested.